Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining the PMI New Jersey Empowering Women in Leadership LCI webinar. My name is Elaine Tanimura. I'm one of the co-founders and co-leaders of this group. So thank you for joining us tonight. Before we get started with our program, just some housekeeping things. Everyone on the line tonight is on mute and your video is turned off. During the presentation, if you have any questions that you'd like our presenters to answer, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll answer questions at the end. If you have general other chat messages, where you're located, if anything you can't see or hear something, you can put them in the chat box. The slides and a recording of tonight's presentation will be available on the chapter website tomorrow, so you can look for that. And at the end of tonight, you'll receive a survey about the program. We value your input, feedback, and if you complete the survey, we'll also submit for your PDUs. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mary Verone, who will start our presentation. Mary?
Thanks, Elaine. Hey, everyone. My name is Mary Verone. I'm an organizational change manager and a consultant, and that's not where I started. So in today's presentation, I will be talking about my career journey, and then I'm really excited because Stella is going to talk about her career journey, and her career journey goes into the exciting world of entrepreneurship. So I hope that you will ask questions and stay engaged and learn a little bit about our journeys so that you don't make, at least for me, the same mistakes I made. So the first slide is Be the Change, how you might create your future. Next slide, please. Now you weren't ready for that, huh?
Not that fast.
So something to think about as we go through this presentation, reflect on your own career and where you might want to take it, or if you are happy with your current career and you really love what you're doing, maybe go a different direction, maybe become an employee or become a consultant or become and own your own business. So some of the things that we will talk about today, we'll go into those areas. And this quote I thought was really amazing. So Stella had put this forward. What you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you create. And that really resonated with me because I think that's really helpful on your change journey. So making the change happen is what we'll be talking about today. And Stella will introduce herself when I switch it on over to her, because she'll do a better justice than me. We'll talk about change strategy. Part of project management is also, hey, you're getting ahead of me.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Part of project management is also change management. And I found that a lot of people don't know what change management is. So what we're doing in this presentation is a little different. We're taking the ProSci ADKAR model and we're applying it to each of our slides. So you will not only learn about careers and journeys and career planning, but you'll also learn a little bit about change management and how we track the stages of adoption. The ADKAR model is something that I'll talk about in a slide coming up. That should help a little bit with, it'll go with our stories. So there'll be examples of what the stages are so that you can learn a little bit about change management, or if you're a change manager, you can give us feedback on how well we did. I'll go into my journey and then I will transition over to Stella for her journey. Okay, now you can go to the next slide. Thank you. This is really important when you're thinking about your career. Don't get frustrated if you find yourself after a reorg or put in a situation that wasn't in your plan. Plans change. They're pretty much wrong as soon as they're made. And this quote is really helpful. There are two ways to be happy: change the situation or change your mindset towards it. And it took me a long time for that mindset piece. So I'll give you a little bit of an example. When COVID hit in 2019, I was resistant to wearing a mask. And my thought process was, oh, well, I'm just riding a bicycle outside. I'm bicycling right past all those germs. I don't talk to anybody. I don't work outside or do anything else outside. So I should be fine. And I thought about it as time went by and heard other people's views and the news. And I thought about, as project managers, we think about the risks, right? And contingency planning. And I thought about, well, what if I fell off my bike, which I'm a bit of a klutz, so I do that. And what if I hurt myself? I've done that before. What if I fell off my bike, hurt myself, and there were people around? They'd probably come up to me and say, "Are you okay, lady?" Which they've done. But if they don't have masks on and I don't have masks on, and maybe it's outside, that would be okay. But then what if I go into an ambulance and then that's a closed environment and I don't have a mask on and they don't have a mask on, and then we go to a hospital and I'm going to ground zero for COVID. So I thought about it and I'm like, I think I could probably wear a mask, even though it probably is not something I need to wear. It's probably a good thing just in case something happens. Also, I don't want to give somebody else COVID. So if I get it, that's one thing. But if I give it to somebody else and they get sick or die, I don't know what I would do. So I decided to change my mindset and to actually wear a mask. So that's a little bit of what the mindset piece is. I couldn't think of a good example in my journey, but it has happened. And I wanted to make sure that people realize that changing your mindset sometimes is super important to still staying happy until you can change the situation. Okay, next slide. What is ADKAR? These are the change journey stages that we'll be talking about as we go through our presentation. ADKAR stands for Awareness, Desire, Knowledge, Ability, and Reinforcement. And it's owned or created by ProSci, which is a change management methodology and a company. And I will give let me give you a brief example of using that mask story. So for example, I went through awareness about COVID and how wearing a mask would be a good thing. All right, I was a little resistant in the beginning. And then I eventually desired it. So I went to that second stage and I'm like, all right, I want to wear a mask. But I couldn't find masks anywhere. Nobody had them. You couldn't get them on Amazon, which was like a first for me. Couldn't get them anywhere. So I was stuck in desire and I couldn't get to the next stage until my daughter went to her friend, the internet, and found a pattern, and she pulled out her sewing machine and she actually made a cute little Star Wars mask. And it was great. And so she gave it to me and I'm like, oh, cool. Now that we have the knowledge, we have a mask, and I got the mask, but I then got stuck in ability because I couldn't wear the mask. If anybody recalls, back when when people were trying to create masks, there were no elastics. So she got like these really long elastic bands. And so when I put the mask on, it didn't fit. It hung down here. So what I figured out how to do this was I put my hair up and then I would wrap the extra rubber bands around my ponytail. So I got out of ability and then I was in reinforcement, no lie, for like a year and a half. I couldn't remember to put that mask in my pocket every single time I went out, or I would lose it, or I'd put it somewhere else, or it'd be in my bike gear, until we were able to buy masks. And once we were able to buy masks, I had masks in my car, I had masks by the front door, I had masks with my bike, I had masks in my pocketbook and my jeans pocket and my coat pocket. I had masks everywhere. And that's the only time I could get to reinforcement. And that's the only way I could sustain the change. Can't even tell you how many times I left the house and had to go back for a mask if I could find one. And our users go through this too. When we launch a new product or a new process or a new tool or system, they often go through these very same stages And it could take a while. They could get stuck on every stage like me, or they could fly right through it. But we're going to talk a little bit about these different stages as it relates to our career. So next slide. I realized I needed to change about 5 years into my career. I was kind of going with the flow as far as careers went. I graduated from college with a marketing degree and then discovered that marketing jobs were in New York City and they paid very little money. And I saw that that was not profitable and it was not something I was going to do, but I didn't know what to do. So I started looking around and I started taking any job that would come, and I would work there for a year and then I would go to the next job because I didn't really care. I didn't have the patience, I should say, about getting a promotion. I just wanted more money. And so I would just go from job to job to job and until my salary got decent, at least. And I discovered project management. And then also when I was a project manager, I worked at a company for 6 years. And the reason I stayed there as long as I did was because I had kids. So as one of the challenges that women often face, it's hard to make a career transition when you're pregnant. I did try, because why not? So I went on interviews when I was pregnant, but I did not actually get any jobs that way. Some people are very successful. It never actually came up in the interview, but it was something that I realized it was too risky to try and actually, if I had gotten an offer, I don't know if I would have taken it anyway. Probably would have. I don't know. And what I realized when I came to the company I was latest at was that there was nobody probably 10, 15 years older than me. And I was pretty darn young. And that was unusual because the last company I had come from, everybody was older than me. I worked next to somebody who had been at the company for 40 years and still working and not planning on retiring anytime soon. So I realized that retirement as an employee at the full employment age, which I had guesstimated it to be about 62, would be unlikely. And that's when I started to come up with a plan, because I realized that I probably would want to work later than when I would not be at this company. The other thing I realized was that I became aware that project management, while I liked it, was missing something. I couldn't really place what that was, but I realized that I would launch a project and then I get moved to another project. And I found myself going back and helping the people that I was working for to actually gain adoption, because we didn't have, the project team just goes away as soon as it launches, but adoption happens as soon as it launches. And I didn't know what to do about it, but it was something that I was frustrated over. The other thing I did that I wanted to call out for awareness was I became self-aware at this new company, especially because at this new company, if you wanted to be seen as a leader, you had to have presentation skills. It was very collaborative. People constantly had meetings and you were expected to speak at the meeting. If you didn't speak, it didn't matter how productive you were, how great your work was, what you wrote. It was really about how you spoke and how you were seen as a leader. Unfortunately for me, in my self-awareness, I realized that I am terrified of presentations and speaking into large groups. And I realized that that was going to be a problem. I could have left, but I decided that I needed to face this fear and come over it. So I was aware that I had this fear and that I needed to solve it. One of the other things that my manager did, which was fantastic, when I was still relatively new. I was only probably like 4 or 5 months in. And she sat me down and she asked me, what did I want to do with my career? And I looked at her and I blinked a few times and I said, I'm still trying to figure this job out. And she said, that's okay. At this company, we tend to move people around every year or so. So you need to kind of plan this stuff out. And she said, well, I can help you. There are 2 career paths in IT. at this company. There is the project management side, which is for planners and people who like to fix processes and systems and tools. And then there is the support side, and those people are heroes, and they put fires out, and they often work long hours. And I said, I want to be a project manager. I do not want the long hours thing. I have kids, and I'm also a planner. I have this book over on the side here called Cheaper by the Dozen. It's not the movie, it's the actual book. The book was written by two process engineers, husband and wife, and they had 12 kids. And the book is about the processes that they put in place to manage that family. And as a kid, I took those processes and I applied them to, you guessed it, my chores. I made sure that my chores were as efficient as possible, the way I cut the lawn, the way I did the laundry, whatever it was, so that I could get out and play with my friends as soon as possible. So process improvements made sense to me as well, because it was something that I had just ingrained in the way I did my homework. I used it in high school, used it in college, so it just made a lot of sense for me. But if somebody hadn't sat me down and said, hey, here's two choices, I might have had self-doubt. I might have questioned, oh, where do I want to go? Do I want to go to support? But she made it really clear for me. One of the things that you can also do to figure out what careers might be good for you is this next book that I have here called Do What You Are, which is made by the people who made Myers-Briggs. And it basically is a book that takes all the different personality types that they have and all the careers that go with it. So of course I went to my Myers-Briggs type and checked, and project management was under there. So I'm like, okay, I have that right. But it had other choices. It even had like lawyer in there, which I was like, huh, never thought about that one. So it was kind of interesting. And it was a way to look at different angles for other different careers in case I might be interested in that. And the other thing is strength finders. One of the things that they offered at work was a strength finders test, which what I loved about strength finders is it's about your strengths. And many of you have probably done it already. Mine was input learner, achiever, activator. And how it really helped me was to understand what I like and what I'm good at, so that when I went for job interviews or when people asked me about myself, I would say, I'm a lifelong learner. I am action oriented. I am not a procrastinator. So I will go and attack things, like work things, and I will get them done quickly. I will prioritize, but I often will start something right away just to start it, rather than do things in the priority order or something like that. And then I am an achiever. So achievers like recognition. They like managers or bosses that talk about what the things that you've done, recognize you. I love awards or trophies or anything like that. And what I found was that when I had a manager who didn't recognize me, I wasn't as engaged. So it does help to know a little bit about yourself as well. And that's what I did in these early stages, and the awareness that I gained, which took me a long time to do. And hopefully you folks learned it a lot faster than me. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Stella. All right, so now I come to desire. So I know what I want to change. How am I going to do it? Do I really want to do it? Is it worth the effort? I knew that I needed to start speaking up. That was just something that I just started to want to do, and I knew it was going to be painful. I get butterflies in my stomach, my face would turn all red, I would start to sweat. It was just really uncomfortable, but I knew I needed to face it. And so I desired that. I also used my learning to go to training. So I tried to learn about all the other things that I could do that project managers would do. I took project management courses. I went for my master's in IT with a specialization in project management. And then I also did a lot of networking. I really liked, especially talking to mentors and older people about how their career paths went, what they did, why do they leave the company earlier, why do we do the things that we do here? And it really helped me to learn faster by talking to other people. I did in my career have career planning consultants. I've had 2. They helped me a lot with like LinkedIn. So when I did desire how to make myself more marketable and how to manage my career, there was somebody there to help. It's a lot easier nowadays with a lot of groups like this and the internet to get that kind of help, but I went out and paid for it. And then I learned later on in my career about change management. And then I started to desire getting out of project management, which I liked, and going into change management, which I was fascinated with. And I wanted to get that gap that I had seen fixed. And those were the 3 things that I really desired. Next slide, because now we're going to talk about how did I get from wanting to do it to actually doing it. So the speaking up piece was a challenge for me because I'd go to these 3-day training classes, and the first day would be fine, and the second day would be harder, and then the third day would be a disaster because they would do like advanced things like trying to heckle me, and they'd get me every time, and I'd leave crying until I found out about Toastmasters. And at this particular company that I was at, there was actually a Toastmasters club nearby, and there were people on my team that were in Toastmasters. So they brought me to their session, and the rest is history. I joined it, and then I gave a presentation. I forced myself to give a presentation every month. They gave me feedback. I got better, and then I started taking leadership. I think by year 2, I was taking a leadership position because I knew if I was in leadership, I would be forcing myself to do more presentations and to get better. The job side, I knew also that I knew something was going to happen when at some point, and I decided that would be consulting. I figured that at a certain age, it might be harder to get a job as an employee. And I also had heard that consulting could be exciting. You could be traveling a lot, and I really like to travel. So I started looking into consulting. And this is later on in my career, my manager sat me down like they do, and she said, what do you want to do? And this time I didn't blink. This time I said, I want to go into IT because my plan is to retire from the company in IT. I think I'd be more marketable and get more money that way. Fine. And so we worked together to make sure that I could get on over to the IT side, which I had started in. So it wasn't too hard to do, but she supported me, which was really, really helpful. And then when I actually jumped on over, I found a job just by asking around where I actually would be managing the consultants. So I'd be managing all of the consultants in the Americas. And that then gave me a lot of knowledge about how they worked, what they did. I have some of them here, like how they charged, how they billed, how they would be successful. Networking is huge in a lot of the consulting firms. I'm not in a consulting firm, but if I ever got into one, I would know that often a project manager will pick the people that are on their project team. And of course, who do they pick? They pick the people that they know and the people they like and the people they worked with before. So networking is super important when you're in one of those consulting firms. And I also decided, well, let me step back a bit. I found out about ProSci when my team was based in the UK, went to ProSci training, and they determined that the rest of the team, which were 2 of us, I had Americas, the other person had Asia Pac, would do our next project using change management. And they taught us ProSci, and it was amazing. It was the best experience ever. And for the first time, when there was a lack of adoption and they raised their hand and they said, nope, Mary, I'm red, I'm out, I actually could do something. I could escalate it, I could bring it back. And the business actually, or the IT managers wanted to hear what the problem was. They cared. and they gave me what I needed so I could make sure that people would adopt the new process. And I went from red to green in 2 weeks, which was an amazing thing to see. People were happy, which made me happy. And management was happy because I was the first one to go live with this entire segment of the business with this new process. They did not have money, though, for me to go for pro-site training. And I decided that I was going to pay out of my own budget because I didn't want to wait. And it turns out that they had gone to a partial change management program, but I went for the full thing. And it was fantastic because when I went, I learned that everybody else who was there was consultants. So most organizational change managers, I'm an organizational change manager that focuses on the people side of change. We are consultants. And I asked them about how they got jobs and how they liked it, and how did they work. And I learned a lot more about organizational change management. ProSci gave me the knowledge that I needed to feel comfortable to become a consultant. Next slide, please. So now I had the awareness, the desire, and the knowledge. And what I needed was the ability. How can I actually do these things? I could go off of memory if you want, but that might be risky. Okay, so the first thing that we'll talk about is the consulting piece. How did I get the ability to move on over to consulting? It took a while, and even when I made the jump, I was pretty nervous. But one of the things that I did, which I felt like I had the Toastmasters training and I could practice at work, but I could only practice where I felt it was safe. And I'm going to jump down to the video games there. I decided, so I was playing a video game and I decided that I was going to start doing some of the activities, and there I could practice. I was online, but nobody knew what I looked like. Nobody knew my name. There's nothing anybody could do to me. And I figured, let me just go and practice. So so the way the game is set up is that there are teams of people with different abilities come together and they fight this bad guy. And they called it a raid. They still call it a raid. And what I did was I would put together, because I wasn't good and I couldn't get on like the A teams. And so what I did was I put together these teams, and a lot of people who were also not good, or people had what they called alts, which are their second rate and third rate characters, would then come and play on my team. And I did have a benefit for being a woman because there weren't too many women who were what they call these leaders, team leaders. And I used my project management skills. I would set up the time that we would do it, and I would put it in the calendar, and I would ask people if they want to join my team. I found that asking people, 90% of the time, people would say yes. And it also taught me to be a strategist because I had to know the battle. I had to know what everybody's skill sets were. I needed to know where they needed to stand, how they had to do things. And I had to go in prepared. And because I like being successful and being prepared and don't mind going and learning things, I would go and learn all these things before the actual event. And man, if you want to get feedback, getting it online is so much easier than getting it in person by somebody you know, because people will tell you outright whether you're wrong or whether you're right or whether something is going to work, or you see it happen. So we would not win many of the battles that we had. And that was fine because it is an iterative process where you continually work at it. But you can quickly learn whether or not you are a good leader or not. And it built my confidence. I was able to lead more teams. I would get a lot of people to join because they wanted to be on a team where there was a woman who was leading it. I don't know, they said something like my voice. I don't know, whatever that means, but I didn't really care because all I wanted to do was become a better leader and to be able to manage people. And if I can manage people that I don't know, people that are either a lot older than me or a lot younger than me that are way more diverse than I get at work, then I can do anything. So that worked out really well for me. It gave me a lot of the confidence. And I went and became a change manager consultant. So I did both at the same time, which made it a little bit harder for me to find a job. I went on many interviews and became a very good interviewee and interviewer. And when I actually did get a job, I was amazed because they told me that I was a natural. And I just wanted to hit myself for all the self-doubt that I had, thinking that I couldn't actually be good at this. And if there's one thing I really want people to think about is if you hear yourself telling yourself that you can't do something or you're going to fail, like write it on a piece of paper and then throw it out or do something to get over that self-doubt. Because the only way you're going to be successful is to not question yourself and doubt yourself on every little turn, but to just go and try it and do it. I wish I had done it sooner, but you know, it is what it is. Hopefully you guys can learn from my mistakes. And then the last one, reinforcement. So I continue to learn. I continue to build my change management skills. I join a lot of groups and I talk to any change manager that I can about what experiences they have and what tips and tricks they have. I network at work, at PMI here at PMI, and then I'm very active on LinkedIn. My posts always tie into change management in some way, shape, or form, or some sort of change. I also mentor because that's also another great way to learn. I volunteer mentor for certain organizations, and then I offer free time at work or to people who I know. And then I still build my self-awareness. I ask for feedback every day. I tell people when I interview that I like feedback because I got feedback after I had gotten a job and they had told me that if I had told them in the interview that I loved getting feedback, I would have been like top of the pile. So evidently I wasn't top of the pile, but I still got the job. I love to coach others. I try to inspire people through my stories because if I found this out with my kids, right? If I tell them what to do, it's just not nearly as much fun. And then when I first took Myers-Briggs, I was tie on everything, which sounds really weird, but I was. And the same thing happened when I took the disc test. Like the people call me up and they're like, you've got these really strange results. However, over time, my Myers-Briggs score changed. So I was tie on introvert and extrovert. And because I did these change activities, I became more of an extrovert. So over time, your personality does change as you build other neurons and work on other skills. The one thing I haven't done, and which is why I'm so excited that Stella's going to go next, is I have not jumped over to my own business. I have my own business, but I haven't actually jumped over to running it and doing it. And I want to now switch on over to Stella so I can learn from her on what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So please welcome Stella.
Hi, my name is Stella Alvo, and I want to thank Mary for inviting me to share in this presentation because I definitely learned a lot from her. I'm not as familiar with the ADKAR process, but I used it to develop this presentation. And what I would like to do is to ask the people who are viewing this is to write down the awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement if you're thinking about making a change. And just think about it for yourself. And so this could be a little bit more interactive. Think about, what you would need, what kind of awareness you need, what kind of desire you want, the kind of knowledge you would need to gain to be able to do what you want to put into place, and the ability, what abilities you might need and reinforcements. You'll also see in my part of the talk, some similarities between what Mary talked about and what I did is I was working at Time Warner, and this was a ways back when video was just brandy new. And I decided that what would be amazing would be to have a video store in the Port Authority bus terminal. And so I so happened to know the people who had some space in the Port Authority bus terminal, and I set up a video store there. So what I did is I needed to network, and you also heard from Mary that networking is so important. It's really important to know who you can engage to make happen what you want. And while writing down those ADKAR initials, I'm hoping that you think about who you might know who can help you if you have an idea of what kind of business you would like. The other was, what are my strengths? And I too took the Gallup talent test, and it came out that I was an individualization, I was a learner, achiever, I was analytical, and I was a relator. And you'll notice that in the beginning of the slides, I asked you to become part of the process. And that's what I do. And that's one of my major strengths, is trying to engage people that are following a journey. And I learned what my strengths were. I also began to look at what was I missing. And I didn't really have a plan. I did have the people, and I did have the funding. And so what I began to think about was, okay, how do I put a plan together? And I began to search different types of business plan development and wrote a 36-page business plan, which helped me think through all of the phases of developing a business. And it was ambitious looking back. And one of the things you'll hear entrepreneurs say often, if I knew now when I started, I probably wouldn't have started, because it was very ambitious, but I didn't know enough to be worried about it. And then what I did is I went out and I talked to people about investing their time and money to help me support my vision. And then my goal, what I wanted to be able to do, was to change from being a manager at Time Warner to being a business owner. I can't ask somebody to change the slide because it's me. So I was working at Time Warner as a strategic manager, and I was working in video. But I wanted to be my own boss. And because I realized that working in a large corporation was a way to make a living and help support my future, but it really wasn't giving me the satisfaction that I wanted, that having somebody tell me what to do from minute to minute felt rather uncomfortable for me. So I began to look at the people I knew, and I knew the owner of Benjamin Books, and the owner of Benjamin Books had bookstores in airports and in terminals. And I went to him and I sold him my idea of having a video store in the Port Authority, because Port Authority has about 4 million people that pass by every day. And what the problem was back then was that you had to actually go out and get your video. So if it was the Port Authority, on your way grabbing your bus, you could grab a video and be home, and you could watch a movie at night and then return it on your back on your way home. So it was not streaming video, it was actually sneakernet video. And the other thing I think that helped was growing up in an entrepreneurial family. My father owned a factory in Manhattan where he made children's wear. And by the time I was 16, I was keeping the books for the family business. So that gave me an idea and made me understand that growing up and being an entrepreneur isn't what you think, in that you have more freedom, you have more time. And when I first started my business in the video store, one of the people that I knew was a Lebanese exporter. And he said to me, the cow grows fat under the eye of the owner. And I said to him, I'm starting a video store. There aren't any cows. And he said, you know, you'll understand when you open up your business. And man, it was less than a week before I got it. And it was really true that unless you were at the business, and I was still working and splitting my time between being at Time Warner, which were killer hours, and running a video store. So there was no free time, there was no free life, there were no friends. It was just really sinking all of my energy into the video store because I was passionate about it. And the other thing that was very good for my making this happen was my desire for saving money and to get over the startup period. Because if you're thinking of starting something and counting on the money from the business, you have to have at least 3 years of money saved up so that if the business is slow to ramp up, you have that available to you. So how did I get the knowledge? I enrolled in an MBA program. I learned business organization and financing. I knew what I wanted, and what I did was something that was, I couldn't afford to buy all the videos to stock initially. So what I did is I went to other video stores in the tri-state area and rented the videos from video stores that were not major rentals for them, and created a database to see what the turn rate was on those specific videos. And when I could do that, I could then return the videos back to the store owners at the end of the month, because I only rented them for a month. And then what I did is I used the videos that were renting at least twice in my store, and I bought them for like a discounted price. The other thing that I did is what I call setting up a kitchen advisory. And I think Mary talked about this a lot in terms of taking advice, learning from people around you. There are a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, and they are very generous with their time and their knowledge and sharing the information with you. And I set up a kitchen advisory board. And these were people who I asked to be on my advisory group. I told them I couldn't pay them, but I asked them if they would be willing to help me, and laid out specifically what I needed them to do and the kind of information that I was going to ask them at least once a month. And like Mary, I decided that when I left Time Warner, that I self-paid for completing my MBA training so that I had all of the courses that I needed under my belt. And what I realized is that I was also very good at consulting and using my ability to persuade and share my interest with people. And because I'm a relator, I really want to know what people's pain points are, and are interested in people and interested in what it is that they're trying to overcome. And that was very helpful in the video store, because I was able to then start to recommend various types of videos to people. And then people felt comfortable coming in and telling me what kinds of videos I should have available. And also being able to see the end state of my plan. And one of the things I would ask you to do, if you did in fact write down the ADKAR, is to ask what success looks like. If in fact you're thinking about making a change, write down all the things on a piece of paper that your successful change looks like, because that is very, very important to know when you succeed. And self-awareness was really being confident that I could make the jump. And as Mary had suggested, that there is that self-doubt. There's the being fearful that people were going to judge you, and also fearful that you were going to fail, or I was going to fail, that the business wouldn't work out. And the other thing that I did often was to revisit the plan. I went into the plan multiple times during the month to see if in fact I had executed on everything that I thought I was going to be able to do. And the other thing it helped me to do is to stay aware of the changing environment. And when I realized that Blockbuster Video was opening superstores, I realized I had to go big or go home. And at that point, I decided that I would sell the video store, and actually did sell it to State News. And State News are the company that sells newspapers in the subway stations and the gum and all of that. They wanted that location because of the traffic. And like Mary, video games were very important to me. When I was working at Time Warner, I was playing one-person shooter games, and somebody from Sony was there, and they actually took a picture of me because they had not seen a woman being interested in video games and first-person shooter. And one of the things, like Mary, that video games helped me to do was to strategize and to look at and understand how the people who are programming the games were in fact directing your actions. And so then for reinforcement, I'm a continuous learner. I love to learn. I network all the time. I have learned to really enjoy being part of the PMI Women in Leadership. I use LinkedIn extensively. I market my product all the time. And what I know my product is me. And that is something that is important to not be self-conscious about. I don't think I'm egotistical, but I may be. But I do blog, and I'm active in social media, as you saw when we advertised this discussion on LinkedIn. And Mary took the lead on that, and everyone in the PMI WIL jumped in, and we got traction for this workshop. And self-awareness. I love the work that I do every day. I too like to mentor. I love to share with people who are in change and who are very interested and just want somebody to act as a sounding board. And the other thing I learned is that it's okay to fail, because failing is part of learning. So fail fast and then pivot. This is one part of my career, is the video store. And what I did after the video store is I took the money from State News that I made on the store, and I went and started a children's multimedia catalog. And then I started a consulting shop, and I have been consulting ever since. And I learned how to take my past experiences and be persistent and don't give up. It is so easy to be discouraged, and especially when you're earning a living, as I imagine a lot of people who are part of this workshop are. Don't be discouraged, and take that plan and take the ADKARs and look at them again and again until you get to something that you can achieve. And two things that I learned from owning a video store is that I don't want to, at this point in my life, I don't want to have staff, and I don't like inventory. And so that's why being a consultant is the best thing to do, because you're based on your own wits, and you base your achievements on what you can envision. And with that, we are going into our question and answers, because we want to hear from you as well. We would like to make this as interactive as possible, and ask your thoughts of what you heard, and ask us your questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Elaine.
Okay, thank you, Mary and Stella. This was very interesting. I learned so much about both of you. Very interesting. I admire your courage for trying different things in your career, both of you. So for people on the line, do you have any questions for Mary and Stella? If so, if you can put them in the Q&A box. So as they said, we'd like to have an open conversation now as best we can, using the Q&A box. Okay, so let's see. Looks like. All right, just a couple of compliments of your stories, but let's see if there's a question. Okay, here's a question. How did you request feedback? I have a few friends who send out short surveys and are asked for 3 words that the person would use to describe them.
Yeah, I'll start, Mary, if that's okay. Part of what I did was try to create relationship, because I'm a relator. And creating relationships, I ask for feedback based on questions that I like to ask people, so that I really appreciate you asking the question you did, because it means that you're interested. And if you and I were talking, I would ask you more questions so that I could get a lot of feedback and understand actually your framework, because everyone looks at life through their own lens, and there's so much learning in that. And I truly enjoy hearing other people's lenses, because I learn from that.
So for me, it was hard. I was afraid to ask for feedback because I was afraid what the answer was going to be. And Toastmasters really helped with that, because when you gave a presentation, you had an evaluator, and that person gave you feedback. And I learned early on that I didn't have to take the feedback. So the second presentation that I gave, I talked about a credit journey, and the person who evaluated me made some comment about how much debt I had or something in the story. And at first I was angry, and then I thought about it, and I'm like, well, you know what? Like, everybody's story is different, and everybody goes through different things, and you know, everybody does things differently. And I learned that not to take it personally. And it took a long time to build that understanding. And now what I do is I know that no matter what they'll say, I thank them, and then I process it. It sometimes takes a while to process their feedback, to think about it, and then say, you know what, they're right, or maybe they're not right. The thing I really had to work on was not responding immediately and rejecting that feedback. I had to like absorb it and thank them for it, and then I chose in my mind whether or not I was going to follow up on that. But it definitely was Toastmasters that started it, because every single presentation I gave, and I also had to give feedback. So I had to give feedback. So by the time I was a manager, I already was giving people feedback. And then as a project manager, like people would argue, team members would argue, and then they'd come to me and they'd be like, oh, well, this person's not doing it right. And I'd have to say, look, you need to give them that feedback. It needs to come from you, not me. And I was able to manage it a lot better because I understood how feedback worked. But in my early days, I wouldn't have done that. I would have gone to them and said, hey, this person's saying this thing, which is not the way to do it, right? So it was definitely a learning experience for me, and it took me a few years, but I'm sure most people could learn a lot faster than it took me. I had to learn to do it.
Very good. Well, thank you both for your answers. Another question, both of you mentioned networking as being important. What approach do you take during an interaction?
Do you want me to go first on this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I was at a company where one of the companies I was only there for a year, and I got to go to a conference, and my manager let me buy business cards, and I was so excited. And he said that his expectation was that I would be going out and giving people the business cards. And so, like, they were all fancy, they had my name on it, and I went to this conference. And I just went around and I introduced myself to people, and we had exchanged business cards, and I made some friends. So some of it worked. I didn't really understand that you should like really build a relationship. And I'm not the same networker I am now, but at least I knew that other people that my boss, who was a director, sent to the conferences in years past wouldn't network. So when I came back, I had like 20 cards and I had stories. And one of the things that I did was I actually built a partnership with another company, because what I was doing was I was going to conferences, IT conferences. And so it was a vendor, this Siebel was the vendor at the time. And I would go to their conference, and then I would learn what things were coming out. And for the CPG industry, they weren't doing what we wanted. I found that they were building the next product based on their next big customer and giving them what they wanted, and we weren't getting what we wanted. But I banded together with some of the CPG people that I met, and we built a group, and then we would work together to get the vendor to build what we needed. And my manager was really impressed with that. So I actually got a really good start. The business cards really helped. And like getting that little, like, I felt like an award, and I felt like I was growing up. But then it gave, and it was felt like a competition too, because nobody else had come back with cards, and I came back with cards and a problem that we could solve as a group. So that was my approach. I've gotten a lot better at it, about like how to work. There's things online that show you like how to work a room and how you can approach people and things like that. So there's a lot of great resources out there.
Yeah, I think I approached it a little bit differently, and I sometimes went in with problems that I was having some sort of information that I needed to get, and I believe that in the room was the answer to that problem. And what I did is I began to talk to people on that subject and see who did and who didn't know what it was that they were looking for. For instance, if I were looking for another video store to rent videos from, I would go to a big conference in California and work an entire trade show. And like Mary, I didn't get my cards. I actually bought them online from Staples, and where they print for $20, you could get 100 cards, and they weren't pretty, but they were useful. They had my name, my address, and my telephone number on it, and I would distribute those. And I still have cards I have bags of cards that, I've often thought it would be a lot of fun to go through LinkedIn and see where people are today. But networking is so important. There just isn't enough words to talk about networking, and there's lots of information about how to do it. And I think you have to find your own style, because it's how you approach a person, or just go up to them and say, hi, my name's Stella, and just start a conversation. What did you do today? Something as simple as that, and then finally get to what it is that you're looking for. And I'm pretty good now. I can work an entire room. If I go to a cocktail party or I go to a meeting, I can hit a whole room in less than 15 minutes.
Okay, that's a topic for another day, Stella, maybe. Okay. All right, let's see. Thank you. Not sure about this one. Let's see. We'll give it a shot. What would you say to minority women in leadership? It is very difficult to be taken seriously in a male-dominated profession like project management. It is even harder for educated minority women. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I would just go back to Mary's slide, and you either change the environment, and I'm not so sure it's easy with minority women to change their environment. And I'm not so sure it's so easy to change your mindset, because you know that you, in a male-dominated industry, and I've kind of morphed over to IT, which started from the video side and from entertainment technology, and it is rough not to have a voice, but it is important to continue to speak. And it is important to continue to let people know what your ideas are. It isn't easy. I don't think there's a really quick remedy. Mary, do you have maybe another opinion on that?
I've found that getting advocates is also helpful. One of the things that you do want to do is build your brand. And as a project manager, I was able to leave people who were not good managers or weren't handling women correctly, and go to other people that were better at managing diversity. Now I'm at a point in my life where I can address it and work other ways of doing things, but it is difficult. There's no doubt about it. And I think sometimes it's not, like Stella was saying, it's not an easy fix. But if you're good at what you do, and you identify when somebody's not going to let you go forward, then I would change the situation and change the manager or where it is that you're working, because I see it every day, and it's to Stella's point, it is hard, and this world is not one where everybody's equal yet.
Good comments. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else that has a question for either Stella or Mary or both tonight? I know we've got some people that want to connect and chat, and thank you for a great presentation, comments. All right, let's see,
Yeah, and Elaine, anyone who wants to connect with me, I'm more than happy to connect on LinkedIn. And my last name is spelled ALVO. And please just reach out, and if I can be part of your kitchen team, I owe a lot of people a lot of help. So more than happy to help in any way.
Okay, good. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. So why don't we go ahead and we'll just wrap up for tonight. So again, Mary and Stella, thank you so much for participating and leading this presentation tonight on change management. With that, I'm just going to say goodnight and thank you again for joining. And thanks again to Mary and Stella. Thanks everyone and have a nice evening.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.